thoughtful ideas and suggestions for guests and topics.
Great events, programs, and student
All the factors are listed.
Welcome to this week's segment of Dialogue Houston. I'm your host, Lawrence Payne. To our regular viewing audience, welcome. To those joining us perhaps for the first time here for HCC's TV Dialogue Houston, we can be found now every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 a.m. and again at 6 p.m. Also on Saturday afternoons at 3 p.m. As always, at the top of the hour, let me thank you very much for your thoughtful calls, emails, and text messages concerning previous shows we've aired here on HCC's TV Dialogue Houston, but particularly your great ideas for thoughts, guests, and subject matters to be covered on upcoming segments of Dialogue Houston, where after all, this is your community affairs, public affairs show here on HCC TV, proudly now starting its 29th season. We are great to have two wonderful guests to join us this day, and it's timely. They're both timely in the subject matter and issues they're going to be talking about, and it's really important to set the right context for both of these presentations. And so let me start with the first. I'll just tell you the second show is going to be with our good friend, Reverend Dr. Fred Smith. We'll be talking about public theology and leadership in theology and what does that mean in practical terms for us today as human beings in a divided world, divided society, divided you name it. But the first show actually leads in some ways to the second one because it's with our good friend, Irene, who is with Lovescaping. And Irene will tell you all about her name, her history, her background. And I'm telling this way on purpose because we've had her on before. So we had Irene on before when we were talking about Lovescaping. It was a saner world. It was a pre-COVID world. It was a much gentler, much nicer world. We actually back then, a few years ago, were living in what I call the state of purple, not locked down in either red or blue. There's a great thing to be said about talking in purple, living in purple, and understanding what that means, and the raw, majestic thing that go with purple of how we see other human beings, how we treat our fellow human beings, how we think about other human beings, how we unconditionally love other human beings, particularly those that may be different from myself, that may not look like me. It's all about lovescaping. Irene, welcome.
Thank you so much, Larry. It is such an honor, and I'm so happy to be back after 2 years it's been.
It has been. The world has changed a lot in those 2 years.
Indeed, it has. And not only has the world changed, but also when I came onto your program, I was just getting started with Lovescaping. We were at the very early times. I was about to publish my book. I was starting my first pilot programs in public schools. And now I'm glad to say I've been able to carry this mission and this program forward. And I'm so excited to share the updates with you and your audience about it.
Before we get into the details, just give us a simple definition of what is lovescaping.
Lovescaping is love in action. We usually think of love as a feeling or an emotion, but I believe that actually love is something that we do, and it has to be intentional. So if you think about a landscaping, right? It has trees, it needs water, it needs sun. Imagine a landscape of love. Lovescaping is love in action through the personal and intentional engagement of 15 pillars. And these are the ingredients that I have identified, almost like the seeds that we need to plant in our world in order for us to embody and practice love. And all of them are values and universal values that we have around the world. But I think they're all necessary ingredients for us to cultivate love intentionally.
We will go through the 15 of them a little bit. But I want to talk a little bit larger in the context. Building the humanity of tomorrow by practicing love in action today. I think that's your theme line, your tagline.
Mm-hmm.
In that tagline, it says to me very clearly that as I think about lovescaping, which is, as you said, intentional and mindful, it's really intentionality and mindfulness of how we practice it every day. It also reminds me of the wonderful definition of hope. Hope is not a state of mind. Hope is a state of constant action and consistent action. And the other thing about love that I think we have to talk about in the 2 years since you were on, in the context of now 2021, particularly after January 6th, that I've always thought about love in two buckets. And this is the way I was taught about love, actually. First of all, the definition of love, the way I was taught is love is care, respect, responsibility, and knowledge. When you say you love someone, you have care, respect, responsibility, and knowledge for that person, of that person. But the other side was the part that I think people get caught up in, that unconditional love and tough unconditional love. And I think that's really where we are. We need both, not either or, both and. But lovescaping gives you a way to talk about the need for both in a context built on pillars and values, as you say, that to me strengthens both sides of the unconditional love dynamic.
I think we have to start with this question of where do we learn to love? As you rightly said, you were taught, or your definition of love was in these sort of two buckets, right?
Mother, father, sisters, and nuns and priests. Mother, father, sister, brothers, nuns, and priests.
Not everybody has the opportunity or the privilege to learn to love at home, right? So the first question that I try to address through my work is, imagine what if learning to love became a core component of our education systems. Imagine if we went to school and part of that school curricula was learning to love. Because if we're not getting it at home, right? We all have to go to school. Every child has to go to school. It is our only hope as we think about building the humanity of tomorrow. So for me, it's all about, how do we prevent, how do we avoid all the antitheses of love, what you were mentioning, what you saw on January 6th, what we've been living lately with this division, with this hatred, with, this fear, right? This exclusion, all the antitheses of love. If we want to combat that, then the answer is we have to learn to love. But again, love doesn't just happen magically. We're not just born into it and we immediately automatically know how to practice love. We need to be taught. We need to be shown and modeled through actions. And so I believe that this should be a core component. Actually, the most important purpose of education, in my opinion, should be learning to love. Because if you think about it, Larry, the world has become more and more globalized. Technology, we have knowledge at the tip of our fingertips with our phones. And so really, what is the purpose of schooling? I think socialization and how we live in community, how we practice our humanity should be one of the most important goals of education, because we are living in a more increasingly diverse world where you are always in contact with people who are different from you. And so how do we teach that difference is good, that difference is valuable, that in difference there is community and there is solidarity and there is all the pillars? So I believe that, if we taught children from the moment they enter school how to practice love in action, how to be lovescapers, how to be empathetic, compassionate, kind, vulnerable, trustworthy, all those skills, all those values, then we wouldn't have these issues that we do in society. It sounds so simple, it's common sense, but we're not doing it. Where do we learn to love? I ask this question when I always start my trainings. Where did you learn to love? And then what is love? We
haven't learned it because I think sometimes we don't want to learn it. When you take love to the larger context, it's about we the people. We have never learned to understand what we the people means. It's still I and me the people. Mm-hmm. And when you talk about love, love is also those warm, wonderful things that you just mentioned. Not either or, it's both and. It's all the warm things, the empathy, the sympathy, the compassion, the caring, all that goes with it. But there's also the other side of love, which is justice. Mm-hmm. And the side of justice and love has to be compatible too. That's why the beloved, the community, is not a reality, because we love to talk about love on the one hand, the charity, the support, the nurturing, the caring of other human beings, but we don't want to talk about love when it comes to the justice, systemic change, eradication of the things that's causing hurt and pain for the people we say we love and we take care of on this side. of the equation. So I think that this tough love, that's why I used the word a minute ago, unconditional love and tough unconditional love. You need both. And that's why I think the work you're doing in the schools and with the young people, laying down with them and for them a foundation of what really is love. When we say we love a thing, we love somebody, we love another person, love another human being. What does that really mean? And more importantly, what are the responsibilities that go with saying you love someone? What are the duties? What are the obligations to that other human being when you say, I love them, I love you, I care for you? And so we got to have both. It's got to be both spheres working at the same time.
I see it a bit differently, Larry. I don't see it as these like both spheres. I actually see it as a whole, like it, and I actually call them pillars, but I like to show them in a circle because they're all equally important. And one of the pillars is liberation. Love liberates. And so when I'm talking about love, I'm not talking about, this mushy, fluffy thing. Love is work. Love is hard work. And the work of anti-racism, the work of justice, I believe is the work of love. Because when I love another human being, that means I'm liberating, I'm being patient, I'm being respectful, I'm being empathetic, I'm being humble, I'm being solidary, I'm being forgiving, I'm communicating. So to me, if those ingredients are present, there is no room for any form of exclusion, of xenophobia, of racism, of any isms. I believe that actually in the context of love, like it's not this or that, it's just this whole conceptualization of love that to me goes back to work. Love is work, and it's much easier to choose fear, which is one of the opposites of love, right? If you think about it, right? When you don't know someone, or if you have kids, if you're a teacher, it's so much easier to use fear to control, to manipulate, to threaten, to get what you want. But love is the hardest road, right? Because it's much harder to be patient, to be empathetic, to be compassionate, to really check myself, check my biases, my beliefs, how we all are brought into the world and we are all products of our environment. And so really love starts with us taking a good look at ourselves. And I think we have to unlearn. We have to do a lot of unlearning because a lot of the actions I see out there that people call love, I would argue that is not love. So that's why I really had to come up, first of all, with a definition of love that to me was really all encompassing of all the things that you just mentioned, right? This idea of justice, of liberation. We are one. I also frame it around Ubuntu, which is I learned about when I lived in Mozambique.
Yeah, I love Ubuntu. Go ahead.
Ubuntu is, a person is a person through persons. So I am because of you. There is no I without me, without you. There's no I without we. And so what does that mean? That my actions, right? Everything I do, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. I live in society, and if you're down, I'm down too. And until all human beings are not all lifted and don't all have opportunities and are not all liberated, then we have work to do. And we have so much work to do. And so that's sort of my take around.
And I don't disagree with anything that you have just said. By the way, everybody understands now why I wanted you on. Yeah. Because it's all about this time we're living in, the times we're living in. If we've just come through and out of a period of fear, and now needing to get into this area of love, and remember, fear is that old simple definition, was just false evidence appearing real. That's all fear has ever been. And if we say that love now is the antithesis of fear, and that if God is love, God, Allah, Yahweh, Buddha, Friday, Saturday, Sunday worship, church, parish, temple, synagogue, and mosque is all the same thing. If we say that that is our goal, to love each other, to love one another, and understanding that in the differences is just that, difference is different, amen, period, not better than, not more than, not less than, just different, because we're all different as human beings. Then it leads one to talk about then, as you said so well, there's only love or no love. To me, what that says, translated another way, there's only God or no God. There's no in between, no kind of sorta, no más o menos. Mm-hmm. And I think what happens in this process, when I first, I'll just get off track for just one moment because you see me smiling, and I'll tell you why I'm smiling. On my first trip to Europe, to Italy, one of the things I loved is when the first wait person walked over to me at breakfast the morning after I landed late that evening, and walked up to me and asked me, "Gas, no gas?" What? Gas, no gas. Did I want gas or no gas? Did I want water with gas, bubblies, water, or no gas? You know what came to my mind? And every time I've heard that phrase, while the whole time I was there, I just smiled. God, no God. And so what happens now in the thing that we saw on this January 6th, that was no God.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That was no love.
Love. Mm-hmm.
That was selfishness at its highest.
Mm-hmm.
That was all about I and me. There was no we and us.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about I and me. What do I?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you talk about love the way you just did, it is so important to have those pillars, those values. It's great that we're teaching young people and children and students, but adults need it probably in some ways more than the kids,
Mm-hmm.
because we don't have it now. It's winner take all. I win, you lose. There's no compromise, no negotiation, no middle ground. No, what's best for me is best for you. That old formula, what's good for A and good for B must also be good for C,
Mm-hmm.
or it's not good.
Yes.
And so that's where we are. That's why I love that you're doing this work, because it really needs to expand.
Yes. Yes, Larry. And actually, I am not only, I'm working with children and youth in schools, but I'm also working with the teachers and starting to work with the families as well. So the idea is that really Lovescaping is a way of being, right? Like in our learning community, how do we all come together to practice these pillars? Parents, families, caretakers, teachers, because But the thing is, though, that as we know, right, if we start early, imagine, right, there's a lot of work we have to do as adults to unlearn, right? It is much harder to unlearn and change as adults as it is to learn as children. So I think we have to do both. I absolutely agree, but I believe this should be just such a core component of our education systems, because again, we learn to hate, and we need to learn to love, right? If we don't want hatred in our society, then when and how are we learning what it means to practice love in action?
And we got to be clear on the words we use and terminology. That's what I've always loved about Lovescaping. It's very intentional in the words it uses and the definitions of the words that it uses. And I think we play games in our society so much with words and wording. I'm one of them people from a very clear perspective and tradition. We use the word evil in our society, in our secular society, because we can't bring ourselves to use the word devil, which is the word we use in the secular society for evil. You drop the D, what do you have?
Mm-hmm.
And so all those things that we are trying not to deal with as a society is catching up with us. Be it the sin and vestige of slavery, be it the sin and vestige of racism and ongoing systemic and institutional racism. All those things are catching up with us because we're not willing to have the love conversation. We're not willing to have the truth and reconciliation conversation. We're not willing to have the racial justice conversation. We're not willing to have the gender discussion, the glass ceiling discussion, the health discussion, you name it. The immigration discussion. How do you separate children from their families? How do you separate children from their families?
Mm-hmm.
Who does that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right. That word that you dropped the D, that's who does that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's time that love in all of its flourishing, because you and I talked about this the very first time we met. It is not enough for human beings just to thrive or survive. It's always been about human beings flourishing.
Mm-hmm.
I want all human beings to flourish
Exactly.
to the fullness of their God-given potential.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm called, you're called, Fred's called, we're all called as servant leaders to help them flourish to the best of their God-given abilities.
Mm-hmm.
But love is the key to that.
It is. And love is a choice, and love is not blind. Actually, to your point, love is anything but blind. Love sees very clearly, right? It notices, it is humble. I always start with humility in the lessons, because I always go back to the pillars when I see the issues in our society, right? This self-righteousness, this sort of frame of like, I am right and everybody else is wrong, or my frame, the way I see the world, the way I understand the world is right or better than, as you said, it's not, we are different. Nobody is better or worse than another person. We are just different. And so if we learn to look at the world from different frames of reference, right? My frame of reference is informed by everything that I've experienced, from where I was born, my language, my culture, my religion, my race, my everything that makes a person a person. And then if I learn that every human being has a frame of reference and everybody's frame is valid, then that opens up the road to empathy. Because if I don't have humility, I cannot practice empathy, because I think my way is the right way. So I am unwilling to put myself in somebody else's shoes and situation and try to understand it. And so there really is, like, I always go back to the pillars, right? And it is like, we have it, and it is our responsibility as a finite human being on this planet. We have a finite time here. How are we spending this time? And what are we leaving behind for the generations to come, right? So that's why I think of building the humanity of tomorrow based on love in action. I believe it's possible because I've been doing, this is the work of my life, Larry, as you know, this is my philosophy of life.
It is. Yes, it is.
So I've seen it. I've seen the transformation that human beings undergone when they are loved and when they feel loved and are loved, and then practice love, because it's a virtuous cycle that happens. When you feel confident, when you feel loved, when you feel worthy, then you are more likely to then be open to loving others. And it's just this, again, it's an amazing transformational cycle. And I'm witnessing it now with the schools, with the youth, and even the adults. So it's possible. A lot of people say you're a dreamer, you know, this is naive, right? All this peace, love talk. I'm like, you know what? This is hard work. This is really hard work. And it is possible. And people do change. And human beings are changed by and with love.
I still believe the beloved community is a possibility. I still believe it with all my heart. I think you have, ever since I've known you, you've always been in good trouble. The word you use, humility, is probably one of the biggest albatross and stumbling blocks, because human beings don't understand how not to be.
Mm-hmm.
Humility is a thing that comes with, I've always said, with the grace of God and the Holy Spirit. Humility is really a learned thing. You know, we are put on the face of this earth as very selfish people. Mm-hmm. We're born selfish. Mm-hmm. You have to learn to be selfless. Mm-hmm. And so as I've taught my servant leadership all these years, the first thing I start with is that I am put on the face of the earth for one reason only, to serve my fellow human being. To do that, I must take care of myself and be healthy and ready, available to serve others. In order to do this, I must be selfish in only one regard, that I take care of myself. Mm-hmm. The 5 things that one must have in their life every day: proper nutrition, proper physical activity, attention to your mental health, spirituality, and laughter. Now, if I'm doing those things in a selfish way to take care of myself, I am now ready, able, and healthy to be selfless mm-hmm. in my service to other human beings. Mm-hmm. That's all it is. Mm-hmm. I'm put here for one reason, and one reason only on the face of this earth: to serve my fellow human being. Love is a big part of serving. Mm-hmm. But love in the form of relationships that develop and nurture and maintain based on mutual trust and respect. Mm-hmm. Because nothing happens without trust. Mm-hmm. Say it again. Nothing mm-hmm. happens without trust. And a trusting, loving relationship, be it in my personal life, my professional life, in my public life, as you just said earlier, I mean, we can do anything. Mm-hmm. We can make anything happen. We can think anything. We can get creative, innovative, and make it happen. Now I'm working with a body of human beings. Yes. Who we love each other, we trust each other. Mm-hmm. Therefore, we can accomplish great things together. Mm-hmm. That's the we and us.
Exactly.
Reason we haven't gotten to we and us is we haven't even been able to get past the love piece yet.
Yeah. But to your point, right? Like you said, humility is a learned behavior. I believe actually all the pillars are learned behavior. So, empathy is a learned behavior. Care is a learned behavior. Respect is a learned behavior. So that's why we have to start with teaching it. So what does respect look like? What does humility look like? What does it sound like, right? Because we can't assume that it's an obvious thing. Like, oh, well, everybody should know, oh, how disrespectful that person was. Well, maybe they never were taught, right? What does it mean to be respectful, right? And so I think we have to go back to the very obvious teaching of these pillars in a way that is, how do I act upon it? What does a humble person say? What does a humble person do, right?
Right. We got about a minute left, so let me see if I can sum up, and I'm gonna give you about 20 seconds with the last word. The last piece we're talking about is so important because we learn these soft skills, these emotional intelligence skills, but we always keep them on the soft side. Empathy, care, concern, and we always want to exercise that understanding of those terms in a charitable way. We love charity. But I want to take those same skills learned and apply them to the justice side. I think we have gotten so locked in because it's easy to do downstream thinking and serve the issues we see coming downstream after the fact, reactive. It is hard to take love and apply it proactively on the upstream side, which is the justice side, and be just as firm and hard in loving the way we address the justice stuff as we address the charity stuff. Mm-hmm. So here's the lesson that has to be learned. It is always two things: aggressive to the issue and reconciliatory to the person involved in the issue. Aggressive as necessary to the issue, but always as loving and reconciliatory as possible to the person involved in the issue. Can't make it personal, can't take it personal, not about the issue, not about the person, it's about the issue. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the piece we got to learn how to develop. 30 seconds, Irene, we got to go.
To paraphrase, Congressman John Lewis's steering posthumous article words, he said, democracy is not a state, it is an act. Love is not a state, it is an act. So again, our responsibility as human beings is to act with love and from love, and to learn to practice each one of these pillars. So I invite all of you to learn more. Lovescaping.
Want to find you by me, all means, please.
Yes, lovescaping.org in English and in Spanish. You can also find my book there. You can learn about the programs in the schools. And so this is a task we have ahead of us, to all be the love we wish to see in the world and to act.
Thank you, my dear. We're going to have you on again, I'm sure, in the near future. I want to build on this and going forward. All right, in closing thoughts and remarks, the Institute for Spirituality and Health is having their Caring Hearts wonderful event coming up. You can go to spiritualityandhealth.org/caringheart. It begins on the 11th of this month and runs through the 18th. We really want you to be part of it. They've come together with a great concept and idea in the virtual world that we all have to do this celebration and gala, which would normally be a gala. And that's part of what Irene was saying. It's another way of expressing love. You notice the title of the thing is Caring Hearts. And hearts here for us mean the thing that I've kind of coined over the years. The word heart, H-E-A-R-T, means helping each achieve real tomorrows. Helping each achieve real tomorrows. That's the unconditional side of the definition of heart. The tough love, unconditional side of heart means helping each achieve realistic tomorrows. You have to learn sometimes how to crawl before we can walk. So we have to all be in part of this wonderful world together, doing what we can in service to our fellow human being. It is really always about we and us and never about I and me. And as we go forward in this year of 2021, we're going to try to explore some of those issues related to all of these topics. So until then, we look forward to you joining us in future segments of Dialogue Houston. As always, be well, stay safe, and until then, peace, power, and love.